From the Oregon State University Extension Service, this is Pollination, a podcast that tells the stories of researchers, land managers, and concerned citizens making bold strides to improve the health of pollinators. I'm your host, Dr. Adoni Melathopoulos, Assistant Professor in Pollinator Health in the Department of Horticulture. Wouldn't it be nice if you encountered some kind of a diseased plant in your backyard or some other kind of pest problem around the house, you could pick up your phone and look at a bunch of pictures, diagnose the problem, and get a science-based, easy-to-understand recommendation of what to do? Well, that's what Weston Miller has been working on in this initiative called Solve Pest Problems. Now, for those of you who don't know Weston, he is really a powerhouse when it comes to OSU's efforts at engaging the public around urban pest management. He leads the OSU Master Gardener program in Clackamas, Multnomah, and Washington County, and through that program, he trains over 175 volunteers per year in integrated pest management, and together they answer over 60,000 questions from the general public. There really is no person better positioned to identify the pinch points and opportunities for changing behavior around pest management in urban settings, which really is one of the key tasks that we have to confront if we want to make our cities better places for pollinators to live. Hope you enjoy the episode. I'm really pleased to be here with Weston Miller. Welcome to Pollination.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
You're in some ways the godfather of the podcast because you had a show, Grow PDX, which I think even gave me the idea for doing the show in the first place. And you were super generous in passing that experience on to me, mentoring me, helping me get my website set up, showing me how to ask questions to guests, really everything I needed to get started. So I can totally say, without a word of a lie, it is really a pleasure having you here finally on episode 121.
Yeah, well, that was a pleasure to get you set up and fun. And I had you on as a guest on Grow PDX a couple times, and that was fun. And I really do love the audio format of radio and podcast. So thank you for having me.
Well, that's really fitting because, this episode is really about how to get information to a lot of people in a concise way. And we've had past episodes where we've talked about pesticide use in agriculture and how we train pesticide applicators to get information to them. We really haven't talked about urban pesticide use. So perhaps just to set this episode up, how big a problem is the issue of pesticide use in cities?
Well, I think that since pesticides are available at stores, hardware stores, home centers, et cetera, people use them and people have them in their homes. And we're doing some user testing for Solve Pest Problems, the website development project that we're doing. And we've been invited to a couple people's homes recently. And I'm finding from yellow jackets to rats to weeds like dandelion and things like that, that pesticide use seems to be pretty common among regular folks for sure. And then in working with the Master Gardener program, we answer tens of thousands of questions from the public every year here in the Portland area. And we definitely find that folks, at least a segment of the population, want to know details about pesticides.
Okay, that's interesting. So people have a wide range of pest control products in their homes. They're trying, presumably, to control a wide range of pest problems. And I guess that begs the question, where are they currently getting that information? I mean, we pride ourselves in extension that we've got a lot of science-based information available for the public, but is that where they're going to get their information, or are there other sources that you've discovered are really important to them?
I think with the general public, at least here in Oregon, people don't know about OSU necessarily, and we don't really have adequate pest management information to convey to them at this point. So certainly some people get information from Master Gardener volunteers. We're at public events like farmers markets and fix-it fairs and things like that. We're also at the International Rose Pest Garden and the Oregon Zoo. Otherwise, the folks we've talked to recently have said they get information from employees at stores like hardware stores. And then they also look online to find information and do Google searches. And sometimes are disappointed about that information, like if it's a blog or sort of a non-reliable information source. And also in talking with Spanish language folks, when they just Googled things, it took them out of the country and they were finding information that wasn't pertinent to our region.
Okay, so what you're saying is the information that's maybe most accessible and easiest to get is not necessarily the best information, the most reliable, the most vetted.
That's correct. Yeah. So this is a clearly identified need, and we are trying to address that gap.
Okay, great. So you saw this problem, you saw this gap, and this is really the genesis of this website, Solve Pest Problems, that's under development. Maybe roll the story back just a little bit. How did you actually get this whole initiative started?
Sure. Well, I've run the Master Gardener program here in the Portland metro area for about 12 years. And it was pretty clear from the get go that OSU just didn't really have a good set of materials to share with the public or to have Master Gardeners use. And then in working with my agency friends here in the area, a regional government body called Metro, plus a number of soil and water conservation districts, City of Portland, City of Gresham, the Oregon Department of Agriculture, they all encouraged us to start planning a response, a comprehensive pest management website. And it's been about 5 years of planning now. Initially, they started to provide us with contracts to do planning activities and to ask folks out in the community what their pest management information needs are. And it's grown from there to the point where at this point we have some strong examples. We're doing user testing, and the hope is to continue to develop the information resource and make it available to folks soon.
Now, I imagine there is a lot of material in the extension, yeah, in the extension catalogs on the websites that are relevant. What's wrong with just those? What? How do those not? How are they missing their mark in terms of this audience?
Great question. It's a different audience. I'd say we have tons of really good resources out there for agricultural audiences, and those are really the intention of things like the PNW insect disease and weed management handbooks. And the folks we're trying to address um, don't have technical backgrounds. They're looking for really straightforward information. So what we've found we've had to do is to basically translate the information from OSU and other great resources into sixth to eighth grade reading level language so that it's understandable for the lay audience or regular folks without
Ah.
backgrounds in pest management or horticulture or any specialized field.
And I imagine the other problem as well, in that in addition to it not being at the right, being in complicated, maybe agriculture specific language and agriculture context, is it scattered all over the place? I imagine that makes it very hard.
That's definitely true. There's information at different sources. They all are used a little bit differently, and we train our master gardeners to use those resources, and it really takes quite a bit for them to do that, and things change regularly. So our hope is to have a comprehensive, across the board, consistent approach that will allow people to find information, figure out what's going on in terms of identification, learn what their options are, and then make an informed decision.
Finally, I guess the other limitation with current extension material is it's probably all in English.
That's absolutely correct. Along the way, it's been really clear from stakeholders that having Spanish language content and other languages for that matter would be really handy, especially here in Oregon. So we've done a really in-depth look at Spanish language content, how to do it, and we've convened an advisory group to provide us with guidance. And the good news is we've made a lot of progress and got a lot of really, really good feedback that's informed the project overall to make it more usable for the lay audience that's our intended group.
Man, this sounds great. I mean, I consider myself, when it comes to a lot of pest problems, as kind of a lay person. So maybe let's take a quick break. And when we come back, I'll pitch you a couple of pest problems that I would have encountered, and we can work through the flow of how Solve Pest Problem, the website, would help you, help me come to addressing some of those problems.
Okay.
Okay, so let's start with a real example. I've got some roses. This has actually happened to me, and I've got spots on the leaves. I don't want them to look, I want them to look really nice. This is a real problem for me. When Solve Pest Problems comes online, how would I ask it this question? How would I interface with it? And how would I be able to solve my pest problem? Walk me through what I
Sure.
see.
Yeah. We hope folks will find us, or we also are doing search engine optimization so that when people do write rose black spots, hopefully we'll come up towards the top of the list.
Okay.
They would get to our homepage, and then what's wrong with my plant would be the category where you'd find roses. In that you could click on the rose link, and then we'll have photographs so people can see the different kinds of
Uh,
signs and symptoms that they might see on roses, including black spot, which is a very descriptive disease, or it's the name is the disease, black spot. And you could get to that area and find information about it, that it's a fungal disease, and that really there's lots you can do about it, starting with planting disease resistant roses, doing a lot of really good hygiene along the way. And then if you really need to do something about it, there are fungicide products available. But all that's unnecessary if you really start start out on the right foot and have resistant roses in the first place. And that would all be framed for Western Oregon here, where we have really high disease pressure during the springtime, and roses that are susceptible to black spot are going to get it.
okay, great. So I get all of these kind of solutions that would pop up, and I guess to find the rose as well, I'd have like a variety of pictures, or I'd have like some way to search for the problem.
Yeah, we'll have a way that people can find the information through a visual search. We'll also have a type in the search or type in keywords feature so people could get to our website and find the page that way as well.
Man, that sounds so easy to use. And I imagine some of our listeners are wondering, what about pollinator information? Is there going to be a way in which people can find pest management situations that be relatively high risk to pollinators and be able to identify them? How is Solve Pest Problem going to address these pollinator concerns?
Specific plants. You've helped us to do that work that pollinators visit and also have problems that people use either fungicides or insecticides for, and there could be a conflict for the pollinators. So, for example, with crab apples here in Oregon, they're going to get diseases as well. Um, the time to spray would be when pollinators are visiting. So we want to help people to make the right choice and not have those plants in the first place, or if they have to do some management with fungicides or herbicides or insecticides, they do it at a time when it's not going to impact the bees.
Okay, so a lot of these problems are covered, but let's say there are other things. Imagine there's other places where people are engaging pests. Like this actually is happening at my house right now. I have those tiny little ants. They appear once in a while. They're in my cupboard. Will it be covering things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And mice and rats,
Oh, good.
lice, bed bugs, things like that. Also, like silverfish and other sort of incidental insects that might be around a home but aren't really doing any damage. We'll also have information on wood damaging insects like termites and
Oh,
carpenter ants,
great.
vertebrate pests, deer, rabbits, gophers, moles, voles, etc. And then there's the plant problems, and then weeds and invasive plants. And especially here in Oregon, that's an area of content we know we really are going to prioritize because we have so many weeds, number one, and also the information we have on that, on weeds, is sort of needing an update or needing to get out to the public as soon as possible.
And it's invasive weeds are a great issue to highlight because oftentimes they're great pollinator plants, and I know having good substitutes for some of these plants, if you have them and you have to remove them, just being able to steer people towards those plants is a great resource.
Yes, and then there's also for things like dandelion, which are also great pollinator plants. Are those a problem? Do people need to deal with them? So helping
Great.
people to really think deeply about their actions and know that dandelions, for example, have benefits and that they're attractive to pollinators, and they also happen to be edible for people, and they're used in different cultures around the world. So we're trying to help people make those balanced, informed decisions in terms of the good and the bad of dandelion and other weeds.
Fantastic. This is going to be so helpful in being able to make those judgments that, often growers and other pesticide applicators are currently making just for the public to be able to weigh these costs and benefits and not use, some cases, these controls not even necessary, may not even be a pest.
Right.
Well, another issue that I think comes up, we often deal with is bees are often confused with social wasps. What's the content on social wasps like?
Well, we definitely want to have content on yellow jackets. They certainly are a problem for people. In the last couple of years, it's been really warm during the summers, and yellow jackets have been pretty fierce. We've also had issues where people have gone and poured lighter fluid on their yellow jacket nest and lit it on fire
Oh
and
dear.
caused wildfires in their area. So we want to help advise people about that. And then with yellow jackets, for example, the lure traps really do work well, and just using some common sense about putting food away and not having puddles of water and things like that can really help. And then if people are going to want to use insecticide for it, alert, it's a potentially dangerous activity, and people will probably get stung multiple times dealing with it. So really, again, just trying to provide people with um, all the facts so that they can make informed decisions about how to handle the situation.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, Solve Pest Problems is currently under development. What's the timeline for its release? When can people expect to see it? And tell us a little bit about some of the partners who are supporting it.
Right. Well, in terms of the partners, we've got Metro regional government, we've got East and West Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District. We're applying for grants at this time. Oregon Department of Agriculture has provided some funding along the way as well. In terms of the timeline, we're hoping that summer of 2021, we're going to have some material out for the public. And then soon after that, a formal launch and beginning evaluation and marketing of the website at that time.
Okay, fantastic. And I know we were just talking as well just before we got the interview going. This is going to be really thought out in terms of usability. That you're doing a lot of usability testing in advance, so that this is not going to be an egghead kind of tool. This is going to be really easy to use.
That's the hope, and we're getting some great feedback doing the usability tests, and that's going to inform the design of the template, the content that we make, and ultimately when we build it all out, the goal is to have it work for everyday people. So we are talking to everyday people to get their input now before we really take the next step.
Fantastic. Hey, we're back with Weston Miller. Really excited about Solve Pest Problems, this responsive design website for solving common pest problems that's under development, being released in summer of 2021. But let's shift gears into this segment we do where I ask all my guests these really wonderful and revealing questions, starting with a book recommendation. I imagine you talk to a lot of people being an extension person in the metro area. What are the books that you reach to or recommend when people are asking for information about pollinators?
Oh, that's a great question. I use a lot of the Xerces Society's resources. And, really specifically, I'm looking for information about plants for pollinators.
Yeah.
So the NRCS in Oregon here also has a great resource for plants for pollinators. And then I refer to my colleague Gail Langolato and her lab, and they're doing great research on pollinators as well.
Fantastic. And I imagine that you must get that question a lot is what's the pollinator plant to put in the garden? And uh, Dr. Longolato's garden ecology lab is certainly coming up with some great recommendations for plants that work in Western Oregon.
Yeah, and then also I guess I'd look outside and look in my own yard and see which plants really seem to be effective. And many of my recommendations come from observation as well, but they're confirmed by the list.
Great advice. Okay, our next question is, do you have a go-to tool? What's a tool that you find sort of indispensable you want our listeners to know about?
Well, for the kind of work I do would be my cell phone. um, my cell phone, it allows me to take pictures and videos, and we're intending to solve pest problems information resource to be really mobile friendly. Most folks are doing internet searches on their phones these days. So I use my phone a ton to generate content, but also to test it out and make sure that it's going to look good on a phone and can be usable.
I remember early on when we were talking about solve pest problems, one of the observation you had was going into a big box store and somebody asking them for information. And the first thing they did was they pulled out their phone and they would look for information that really people are looking for stuff that sizes well on their phone, you can get the answer quick. Because I imagine that person in the big box store being asked a question is time crunched and they really need to have
Yeah, they're
something.
time crunched and they're either using phones or tablets. So it's got to be really quick and easy and visually oriented. They're not reading a lot of stuff. They're scanning as quickly as possible.
Oh, I remember the other thing about in the construction of solve pest problems, there's a lot of images and just having images of all these, very specific pest problems, very specific pests, the different contexts, like it's all going to be in the app. It's really image rich.
That's true. Bugwood.org has just a plethora of images, and I take dozens or hundreds of photos a year of pest problems and management activities and so on. And then also these days, just the quality of cell phone cameras and video is so good that I also I use it to gather information, to create content for the website.
Fantastic. Well, the last question I have for you is if you have a favorite pollinator species.
Of actual insect or of a plant that attracts them?
Oh, for you, Weston, it can be either.
It can be either.
Yeah.
I'm more of a plant guy.
Uh-huh.
I can identify general groups of pollinators, but I'm going to go ahead and just say yarrow is my favorite plant for attracting pollinators, followed by buckwheat and Phacelia.
Those are three really great plants, and they all are very easy to grow.
That's true, and that's sort of a main criteria for me in terms of plants is it easy to grow. Will it survive my neglect?
Mm-hmm. And all three of them will come back. Like yarrow is not an annual; it's a perennial. But Phacelia is an annual that reseeds really easily.
And buckwheat also does.
Oh, and buckwheat.
And then,
yeah.
Meadow foam would be my third favorite annual reseeder as well. That's great for attracting pollinators.
Oh, I have a meadow foam question. So the meadow foam that's available. So meadow foam is available. You can get meadow foam seed. It's just not the same thing as that's out in the field, which you can't get seed for.
That's grown on a field scale for cosmetics and such.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's horticulture varieties available, and I bought both transplants and seeds, and it's the same yellow and white flower, sort of lower growing meadow foam.
Fantastic. Well, I know we were just having a conversation in the office today of people who rear mason bees. Meadow foam is a really great plant for early bloomer for mason bees. They love the plant. Those are great.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Those are great suggestions. Thank you so much. And we are anticipating with bated breath, the release of Solve Pest Problems is going to really solve a lot of issues here around pests, what to do about pests and how to reduce pesticide use.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. The show is produced by Quinn Sinan-Neal, who's a student here at OSU in the New Media Communications program, and the show wouldn't even be possible without the support of the Oregon Legislature, the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, and Western SARE. Show notes with links mentioned on each episode are available on the website, which is at pollinationpodcast.oregonstate.edu. I also love hearing from you, and there's several ways to connect with me. The first one is you can visit the website and leave an episode-specific comment. You can suggest a future guest or topic, or ask a question that could be featured in a future episode. But you can do the same things on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook by visiting the Oregon Bee Project. Thanks so much for listening, and see you next week.